RainCode is a game about master detectives with special abilities called forensic fortes. These are more supernatural than superpower, and the game treats these more like unusual talents that have to be honed over time for the purpose of mystery solving. Throughout the game you get first-hand experience with some of these fortes, which all put a cool twist on the investigations. Very mild spoilers ahead. For example, Halara has an ability called postcognition. This lets them visualize the crime scene from the past, even if it's completely scrubbed of its evidence in the present. With this ability, the player is able to investigate a string of serial killings that took place over a several-month period. Another example is Desuhiko, who has a serious knack for making disguises. This ability leads to one of my favorite investigations of all time, where you investigate witnesses as the prime suspects. It's a very unique perspective that I haven't seen in any other game I've played. Generally, I think fortes are really fun. They add a lot of flavor to every investigation. My only complaint about postcognition and disguise is that they feel so underused. I wanted more time to play with them, which I think is a good sign that at the very least they are fun and well implemented. But there's one ability that just doesn't do it for me. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that this one ability is broken at a fundamental level. And I don't mean broken as in like overpowered, though the game does seem to think this ability is overpowered. I'm talking about time leap, the ability to go backwards in time. If we're talking pure power scaling, time manipulation is usually one of the stronger ability types. There's a reason there are 3 separate final bosses in the JoJo series who have this kind of power. Time is abstract enough to be really hard for the average character to deal with. In universe, for most stories, these powers are considered rare and unusually powerful. And RainCode agrees that time travel is very strong. It treats Rewind as if it's like the strongest ability in the game, with multiple characters commenting on just how busted it is. But like, is it though? Fubuki can rewind time by a few minutes at once, but once she does, she can't continue going back beyond that point. Bigger jumps are more physically taxing for her to do, and she does get tired very quickly. She's the only one who perceives the time jump unless someone like Yuma is actively sharing her power. This all sounds reasonable enough, right? In some ways it almost feels overtuned. With all these restrictions, it's easy to forget that she's also just a girl. She grew up sheltered, has no combat experience, and is as dense as a brick.
I am so naive that the servants call me dummy thick behind my back.
I don't think that's what they meant. Anyway, it's never too late to learn new things.
She's not winning any fights anytime soon. But that's kind of weird, right? Despite what RainCode wants you to believe, this is not an action game. Fubuki actually uses Rewind to avoid as much conflict as possible. But then why is Time Leap even here, and why does it feel so out of place? Postcognition and disguise feel very distinct from each other, but they do have one thing in common. They give the player a new way to investigate. You rely on these abilities to find new evidence and uncover the truth. Time Leap does not do that. You spend a whole chapter with Fubuki and her ability, and it's frankly underwhelming. I kept waiting for some twist, for some moment where Time Leap comes in clutch and reveals some critical piece of information. But that moment never came. Time Leap isn't completely useless, but... well, here's how it's actually used. Yuma's on the run from local law enforcement. If he gets caught, like if he fails a QuickTime event, Fubuki can rewind time. This means that Yuma can try again as much as he needs to without the player having to worry about facing consequences. Can you guess what happens when Fubuki isn't around to use rewind on Yuma? The exact same thing! The player is allowed to fail QuickTime events as much as they want to, with 0 penalty, for the entire game! Fubuki's gimmick was already a feature before she even joined your team. It's kinda like how Shinigami has the special ability to keep track of all of your evidence, which is just a normal mechanic in every other mystery game. Shinigami gets away with it because she is a constant companion. Fubuki, meanwhile, teams up with you in Chapter 3. Why are we pretending that she's bringing a whole new mechanic to the table halfway through the game? The second way that you use this ability is equally, or even more, disappointing. It lets you brute force puzzles, which is like my favorite way to solve puzzles. These brain teasers are strapped to bombs for some reason, and you only have a few seconds to solve them, but Fubuki lets you guess as many times as you want. Some of these puzzles are like very difficult to do off the top of your head, so I feel like Fubuki using Rewind to let you brute force these puzzles is the intended solution? No, that's fine. I didn't want to use my critical thinking skills. I'm happy with just brute forcing a puzzle. Yeah, this feels like the natural way to do things. How can a gimmick sound so cool on paper, but be so dull in practice? In a different game, Time Leap could be a really fun gimmick, but in this game, it doesn't add anything to the mystery solving, which is the one thing it needs to do. Now, I do think Rewind could be good, if implemented correctly, but we'll have to get a little creative to do it. So let's think. What makes the concept of Time Leap cool in the first place? Why does it feel so tantalizing? Well, it gives you a chance to react to an otherwise unexpected event. For example, some emergency happens, you can jump back a few minutes in time and prevent it. The other cool thing it does is it gives you a chance to approach the same situation from different angles, making different choices to see what happens, for example. So how can we capitalize on the cool parts of time travel while staying true to the mystery-solving mechanics of this game? The first option is something that I actually thought they were going to do. Let Fubuki react to a murder happening and then witness it twice. It seemed so obvious to me, but let me walk you through what I'm thinking about. When the rooftop murder occurred, Fubuki was standing just outside the building. She would have heard the gunshot. With Rewind, she could have gone back and started running around the outside, which could have led to her seeing something. A clue, perhaps. Or maybe she sees nothing, which in itself could also be a clue. Knowing where the killer didn't go could help us narrow down where they did go. Now, honestly, with this particular case, I don't think it would have made a huge difference narratively, but at least it would have justified having this ability around. The other idea I have takes a slightly different approach, but I think it makes a much better use of this ability. Let's talk about interrogation sequences. I've always thought it was a little unrealistic that so many games let you interrogate someone and just keep on talking until you get all the info you need. Some witnesses don't want you discovering the truth, and I think they would immediately shut down if they accidentally said something important. But Rewind can circumvent this issue in a way that feels really clever. Let's say there's an old man at the hospital. He saw the crime, but he's old and he needs his rest. The nurse says we can talk to him for a couple of minutes max, but after a few questions, he ends up dozing off, cutting the interview short. There's no way to get all the information we need in the allotted time. Fortunately, with Fubuki, we have all the time we need. Yuma could go down 3 or 4 different lines of questioning in the time it would normally take to go through just one. Then maybe later in the same case, we have a completely unwilling witness. They refuse to say much of anything, but after a brief conversation, they do let one key piece of information slip. They realize their mistake and they stop talking entirely. Fortunately, with Rewind, we can take that information back with us and ask new questions. These questions in turn can lead to new slip-ups. Eventually, Yuma can present all of this accumulated information and lead the suspect to believe that we already know everything, at which point the suspect will reveal the one final clue. From the suspect's perspective, they might have only slipped up once, but from our perspective, we learned so much more than he'll ever realize. Rewind has so much potential to be good, and it just isn't. It's an awesome idea that never quite did itself justice, and that's sort of how I feel about this game as a whole. RainCode is full of these fantastic ideas that never quite live up to expectations. RainCode is not a bad game by any means, but it is a game that is so close to being fantastic that I can't stop wanting more for it. That's also why this is not the first, and will also not be the last video I have about RainCode on this channel. If you like mystery games, well, great news, I like mystery games too. Maybe leave a recommendation down in the comments for me. And if you don't like RainCode or mystery games and watched this video for some reason, the good news for you is I don't just make RainCode videos. I've made a few Zelda videos recently that I'm really proud of, so maybe give those a look as well. While you're here, why not hit that subscribe button? Who knows? Maybe I'll make another video someday.
I have always been told my imagination is my only real gift.